Hey, this is Wes McDermott. We're in Chapter 2, and this is Part 6. In this video, we're going to talk about scripting. Now, scripting is a pretty complex topic, and it would take a lot more than just a single video to kind of go through this. But this is the crash course, so the idea of this video is just to give you a rundown of how scripting works in Unity, so that you can kind of get your head around, the process and the workflow, and kind of, the anatomy of a script, so to speak. It's really just a high-level overview, and to help you kind of get your bearings straight as you begin on your journey into writing scripts within Unity. Okay, so I actually started a new little blank project that you'll be able to load. So it's called Unity Crash Course 02_06_scripting. If you want, you can just create a new Unity project and kind of follow along here as we go through this. But what we're going to do is we're going to just create a very, very simple example of a script that has one object look at another object at runtime. And by doing this, we're going to show how to, what a script looks like, how we create a script, how we add a script to an object, and how we set some parameters in the inspector. So first thing we're going to want to do is come over to game object, and I'm going to create a couple game objects here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a cube, and you can see that creates a cube in my 3D space. We've got a transform here, and we've got some values here, so this actually isn't centered, but that's okay. We're actually going to work with that in our script. And then finally, we also want to do a game object, create other, and we're going to create a sphere. And so with that sphere selected, I'm just going to grab the x-axis here and just left-click and drag that guy off in space. So this guy is, so here's our two guys. We got a sphere and we've got a cube. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a script. So in this empty project, I don't have anything created. So what we're going to do is just come over to our project browser here. And I'm just going to left click this drop down menu, and I'm going to create a script. Now there's three types of scripts that we can work with, or three languages. Here we've got JavaScript, C#, and Boo. I'm more familiar with C#, so that's what I'm going to use in this example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say Unity script and hit enter. So I've just basically created a new blank script, and I've named it Unity script. And that's what we've done here. So like I said before, I'm used to using C#. We're not going to get bogged down on the differences between the languages and all that kind of stuff. It's way too complex, and it would take too many videos to actually do everything, in one language and then show it again in another language and all that stuff. But the thing about Unity is you can use these different languages. You can use JavaScript and C# together if you want. Now, not in the same script, but you can mix them. So you can have C# scripts in your project, and you can have JavaScript in your project, and that doesn't hurt anything. So that's really nice. You may be really versed in JavaScript, but you may get some C# scripts from the asset store, or you may get some C# scripts from a buddy who's working with you, and you can work with whatever environment you want. And Unity is very flexible that way. And so what we're going to do before we actually even get into the script, real quick, let's go over here to the document. So I'm at docs.unity3d.com, and what you're going to go is to the scripting tab, and you're definitely going to want to visit this several times. I use this on a daily basis because I'm constantly, I don't memorize any of this stuff, but what I do is I use the scripting references constantly. So if I go, I've got menu, I've got this overview, I've got this runtime classes. So if I click that, these are all these things that you see here, these are all the runtime classes that you have access to when you're working with Unity. So these are all part of the Unity engine here. And so I'll hit the back button. And you can see that there's a lot of helpful information into this. So we'll come back to this here in a minute. But for now, let's just drop back over to Unity. We've got this script asset here. Let's just double click here, we'll close that guy. Let's just double click, and that's going to open up MonoDevelop here. And now we've got our first script here, or what a script actually looks like here. I'm just going to kind of zoom in my view here so you can get a good look at this from the video. And so, like I said before, this is what a C# script looks like. So the JavaScript looks a little bit different, and I'll show you an example of what that would look like. But the main thing is that you're using this Unity engine. So at the very top of the script, you're going to be using Unity engine. So if we go back, that's basically saying, hey, I want to have access to all of the Unity runtime classes here that at my disposal as I'm writing my scripts and working in my environment here. So let's go back to MonoDevelop. This using system.collections, this is part of C#. So this is basically from the .NET framework that you can use. Like I said, C# is something that I use. I started with Flash, and so when I came over to Unity, I was JavaScript, and that's what I used. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's very powerful, and within Unity, it's very powerful. I just happen to find, in my personal preference, the C Sharp's a bit more powerful than the JavaScript, and then also C Sharp's a very good language for game development. So I would highly recommend that, if you're using JavaScript now, take a look at the C Sharp. Try to, try to get yourself more involved in that section. If you're starting from scratch, then just go ahead and start with, C Sharp. In the long run, I think C Sharp's a better language for game development. So it all comes down to personal taste, what you like, what you could work with better. It really doesn't matter. But anyways, this system.collection is part of the .NET framework. So what we have here is we've got, with our script here, we've got a class. So this script is basically a self-contained entity, so to speak, of this Unity script. Okay, and so it inherits from this thing called a mono behavior, and so every script that you create inside of Unity is basically going to work, or it's basically derive itself from this mono behavior. So let's see what that is. So if I come back and let's just see if I can find something through mono here. Let's do this behavior. So if we go ahead and just script and we take a look at the behavior, it says mono behavior is the base class of every script derives from. So every Unity script that you create is going to derive from mono behavior. And it basically gives us that core framework of everything we need to write scripts inside of Unity. So if we kind of look at the overridable functions that we have in here, we have update. So if I kind of jump back over here to mono develop, you can see here's that update that it's talking about. We've got start. So again, if we come back over here to mono develop, here's the start. We've got mouse on mouse enters. We've got on collision events, all kinds of stuff here as we go across. We've got the ability for inherited members. Is the game object enabled? Can we get to the light? Can we look at the renderer? Things like that. We have the ability to find objects of type. There's a lot of just functions and inherited members that come from basically deriving from this mono behavior. Something else here, and this is a really good note it says here, is that using JavaScript, every script automatically derives from mono behavior. However, when using C# or Boo, you have to explicitly derive from mono behavior, and that's where this looks a little different. So here we're creating a public class of Unity script and we're deriving from mono behavior. In JavaScript, you don't have to do this, so you don't need this stuff here. You can just start working with your start and your update functions and things like that. But for the most part, it's the same thing. The same type of framework, the same type of stuff that you're going to be doing in the script's the same. And so let's go ahead and look at the start. So if we go ahead and say behavior start, the description of this guy says that start is called just before any of the update methods is called for the first time. So if we kind of go back over to our script, we can see that they kind of give us a little code, or excuse me, a little comment here that says this is used for initialization. So it's basically saying that this function is going to fire before our update function. And our update function here is going to be called once per frame. So any of our actual game logic or things that we want to animate or happen or change, or we want to poll for information or anything like that we want to happen per frame as the game is running, we have to do that within this update function. So what we're going to do to kind of show this is we're going to go ahead and start with our first variable to this guy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a variable that I want to be able to set from within the Unity editor itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write public, and so what happens is as I start to write this word, the IntelliSense of monodevelop starts to take over, and it knows that well, you're probably going to want one of these three things, and public's what I want. So with it selected, I can just hit enter, and the keyword turns blue here, and so it knows that I want to do that. So I want to make a public variable. And of what type do I want this to be? So I actually want to set a game object here. So I'm going to say, well, actually, no, I don't want to do that. I actually want to, instead of using a game object, I actually want to work with a transform. So I'm going to start typing the word transform. If I can spell it right here, transform, and you can see that the IntelliSense is actually showing me here's what I'm talking about, transform. So enter on the keyboard, transform turns blue. It's part of the Unity engine, and now I'm going to name this. So I'm going to say look at me semicolon. So I'm going to close this here with a semicolon. So what I've created here was my first variable in C#. We tell this to be public, so that means that it's available in the Unity editor. We give it a type, so we say that this is going to be of type transform, and then finally we give it a name. One really quick difference, if we were doing this in JavaScript, I believe it would look something like, I think all we would do is we would say, look, I don't even know if you need the public in JavaScript, but you would say, look at me, and then you would do like colon, and then you would actually say transform. So the JavaScript version looks a little different in terms of, you know, how you're actually going to set the type. So C# puts it before the variable name, and JavaScript puts it after. But again, we won't worry about stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit save. I'm going to jump back over to Unity, and now I've got this script here, and I want to apply that to something. So let's go back up to our hierarchy view, and let's select our cube, and now I want to apply this script to an actual game object. Well, all I've got to do is just from here, I'm just going to left click, drag and drop that script right onto the inspector, and now we've actually applied a script to our first game object here. And you can notice here that it's a component, so it's a script component, and then that look at me variable is set for us, and it basically has a section here where we can actually apply something to this. So we're basically going to set that variable, and you can see that it says none because nothing's there yet, and then it given us a type transform here. And if you notice that Unity also has said the look at me, it's actually separated into something that's a little bit more readable. If you actually if you use camelback notation, so basically, you know, you've got look, and then the next word is capital, and then you've got at, and then the next word being me, the M is capital. If you use that camelback notation, if you bring this into a Unity editor, Unity will actually split that into 3 words for me, which is kind of nice. So now we have the ability to say, hey, this thing's looking for a transform. Okay, well, you know, let's think about that for a second. You know, what's a transform? So if we kind of just jump back over here, and we're in our script reference, let's start to type the word in, transform. And so we'll hit enter on this, and we've got in our API here, we've got transform. So let's click this guy. And basically, it's the position, rotation, and scale of an object. And the position has all these variables that we can access. Okay, so it's got all these variables and functions and things like that we can access. And if we go back to Unity, just as we've talked about in previous videos, we've got the cube selected. If we go at the top of this inspector here, on its, you can see that it has a transform, and it has position of x. It has position x, y, and z. It has rotation and scale. And so now this look at me script is saying, hey, I need a transform to work with. So let's go ahead and set this variable. And what I want to do is I want to set it to be that sphere. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to left click, drag and drop that sphere right onto this variable here. And by doing that, you can see that I've actually set that variable right here in the Unity editor. So if we go ahead and look at this point in time, it's the same as saying, hey, I want to equal this variable to something. And I did that not through code, but I did that through the editor, and I made that public so that I could do that. So now in our script, we basically have, you know, we have our start function, we have our update function, and we have a variable that's been set through the editor. Let's take a look at how this start works. Like I said before, we can use this for initialization. This fires as soon as the game starts, and it only fires one time. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and take our object. If we go back and look, this is kind of a silly thing that we can do, but if we take our object, we can see that its position x, y, and z is kind of has some value to it. Let's go ahead and throw this guy out the origin when this script runs. So we'll go over here and we'll say we want to do something here. So as we start to write the word transform, you can see that the IntelliSense is showing me, hey, there is a transform. And you can see that this is part of the Unity engine transform, and we're using that at the top. So what I'm going to do is hit enter. And so, but how does it know that? Okay, so one of the things to think about with this is every game object, it has a transform to it, and this script is attached to that transform, so that's how the script knows about the transform. So what I want to do is I basically, when this game runs, this script is attached to that cube, and I want to take the cube and I want to place it at the origin. So what we're going to do is we're going to say transform dot, and now you can see the IntelliSense is bringing up all kinds of stuff about the transform. So again, if we come over to our script reference, and I start typing in transform, and we'll take a look at what this guy can do. And so right here at the top, we've got a lot of things like position. So let's take a look at position here. So transform top position, it's a vector 3 position, and the description here is that the position of the transform in world space. One of the nice things about the Unity script reference is that you've got, they give you really nice code examples, really nice and clean. You can copy and paste right from these things, but then also you can change the language. So if we want to look at this in JavaScript, it looks this way. If we want to do this in C#, it's going to look this way here. So if I wanted to, we could just copy and paste this straight in. But we're going to go ahead and just kind of type this in. So let's go back to our script. And so what we're going to do is transform dot position. So I'm going to start saying type in position. It already finds it for me, so we hit enter, and then we're going to equal this to something. Okay, so if we go back to Unity, we can see we have our transform, and we're working with our position parameters. So we have these here, and again, it's a vector, so we've got X, Y, and Z. So if we go back to MonoDevelop, we need to set this to another vector. So it's telling us right here that IntelliSense just popped up again and said that we need to put this in as a vector 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start typing the word vector, and so vector 3, and in this case I'm going to use a convenience function of this. So I'm going to hit dot, and again we've got some elements that are popping up here, so I'm going to start typing in 0, and now we got vector 3.0 and semicolon. So basically what I'm saying here is I want to say, okay, when this gas starts, so when the game starts running, this script's going to say, okay, there's some information here in this start function. What I want to do is I want to take the transform position of the game object that I'm attached to, and I want to equal that to a vector 3.0. So that's the same as saying position 0, position x 0, position y 0, and position z 0. And if we come back over in our scripting reference here, we start to type in vector 3. You can see all of the information we get for vector 3, and here we go. We've got some class variables here, vector 3.0. We select this, and here is where we can work with vector 3.0. So that's where we're getting that. So now what we'll do is we'll just save this script. We'll go back over to Unity, and we'll hit play. And what happens is you can see that our cube snapped right to the origin. And if we go ahead and look at our position, we've got our X, Y, and Z are all 0, 0, 0. So now we're going to hit, we'll turn that off, and you can see that once the game starts running, it snaps itself back to the position it was set inside the editor. And so what we want to show with that is that the start function is used for initialization. So in our case, we initialize that game object to be at the origin. So that was how we worked with that. So the next thing that we want to do is we actually want to kind of demonstrate how the update function works. So again, this is called once per frame. So we want to actually introduce some type of we want our game objects to do something. So like I told you before, we have this cube. We want this cube to look at this other game object. So let's go ahead and do that now. So in our update function, what we're going to do is we're going to say transform, start typing in transform, and then I'm going to say dot, and I'm going to start looking for look at, and you can see that the IntelliSense found look at for me. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a parenthesis, and it's going to tell me that it needs a vector 3.world position. Okay, and so that transform here, what we can do with that guy is we can say look at me. So I'm going to start typing look at me, it finds it, and then all I've got to do is say look at me. So I'm talking about the transform, and I'm going to say dot position. Okay, and now I'm going to close that parenthesis and hit the semicolon on that. So what we've done is we've taken the transform that this game object, or excuse me, this script is attached to. So the transform on the game object. We've ran a function that's part of the transform called look at, and then we've given that look at the look at function. We've actually given it something to look at. So it's look at me's position is basically what this is saying. So we'll save this guy. We'll go back into Unity. And we'll select our cube. Now remember, in our inspector here, this look at me variable has been set to our sphere. If I select this item, you can see that right here in my hierarchy, it kind of highlighted that for us. So now, if I hit play, our cube snaps back to its origin. Remember, it was initialized that way in our start function. Now the cool thing is if I actually select our sphere and I start moving our sphere, take a look at what our game object's doing. Our cube, it's moving and rotating itself to look at this guy. So here we'll kind of just move this guy on the Z back and forth. So you can see this guy is rotating here, and you can see that the position's changing here for the sphere, and the rotation's actually changing for the the cube. So as I start to move this sphere around, this other game object is looking at that. So that's really how we kind of go across attaching or creating some type of movement here within our script, is because we've got this transform.lookAt is actually changing because this update function is called once per frame. So every frame, the lookAt function for the transform is changing to look at the new position of that sphere that we're actually moving inside of the editor. Okay, so just real quick, just to show another way that we might use this. Let's just change this, and we're going to apply the same script to another game object. So let's set a new variable for us. So this time we're going to do a vector3, and then we're going to say let's just do start position is what we'll call this guy. Here, we'll just say start POS, semicolon. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just set this transform type position instead of vector3.0. We're going to set this to the start position. And then we'll save. So we've actually made this a little bit more user-friendly as far as being able to set things inside of the editor. Now we'll come back over here to Unity. We'll select our cube, and you can see now that we've got our start position. So if I drop this down, you can see that we actually have some XYZ values that we can work with. So for the cube, let's go ahead and set him to 0, and let's take this sphere and let's apply this exact same script. So let's drag and drop this script right here into the editor, and we're going to set a different position here. Let's also do this. Let's do a game object. Let's create another game object, and this time we're going to let's just do a cylinder, and let's just kind of move this off into scene like this. So now we've got a new object here, and we're going to move this guy around. And let's go over to our sphere, and let's set the cylinder here. So our sphere is going to be looking at the cylinder, and our cube is still going to be looking at the sphere. So we've kind of got a little triangle going here on how these guys are going to work. The sphere, instead of setting this guy here, let's do this. Let's set this guy at, here, let's do his X, Y, and Z, but let's just move him up 3 units here on the, 3 units up on the Y. Okay, so now what we'll do is we'll hit play, and you can see that the cube and the sphere have both set themselves to what the start position variable was going to be. And now if I go ahead and select the cylinder and I start to move the cylinder, the sphere is going to be really hard to see move because it's round. So here, let's do that. Let's do something real quick. Let's go ahead and take this sphere and let's remove that guy. And let's just duplicate this guy. All right, and we're going to move him off into space here. And let's do the same thing. Let's just set him to 3. Let's go ahead and grab the cylinder here and throw that on as the transform. And so let's check this guy. So he's missing the sphere. Let's here, let's do this. Let's just rename this guy to cube 1. Let's take this guy and let's rename him to cube 02. Let's take cube 1, and I want him to look at cube 2. His start position is going to be 0, 0, 0. Cube 2, excuse me here, cube 2 is going to be looking at the cylinder, and his start position is going to be 0 on the X, 0 on the Z, but we're going to move him up 3 units on the Y. And now let's go ahead and hit play. So you can see that we've got our 2 cubes here. They've snapped in position. I'm going to grab hold of my cylinder, and as I start to move this stuff, you can see that the top cube is actually rotating, but this cube isn't rotating. However, if I grab hold of this guy and I start to move him, now you can see that he's starting to look. So let's move him over this way. And the other thing that's kind of neat is even as I'm moving this cube, now this isn't the best script here, but as I start to move this cube a little bit here, you can see that it's kind of snapping everywhere because I kind of, this isn't a really good way of having the cylinder look at this while I'm trying to move this here. But as you can see that as I start to move this cube, this guy's starting to look at him. This cube is pointing to where he needs to go. You can actually see this through the transform. So here's our first cube. He's pointing. The z-axis is pointing towards this cube, and our second cube is looking. He's looking at what he's supposed to be looking at. And as I rotate this guy, he gets put into place here. So we'll go ahead and uncheck that or turn off that game here from running, and we'll go back over to MonoDevelop. And we'll take a look here at this script. So, this is a very, very simple example of how to do any type of scripting inside of Unity. But the whole purpose here is just to kind of show this roughly, how this works. So to think about, just to kind of recap what's going on here is we've got our script. Our scripts are always going to basically inherit themselves from mono behavior. They're going to use the Unity Engine framework. You're going to have a start function and an update function. Now, there's other types of functions. There's awake and onAble and things like that do different things. But for the most part, and just from a kind of a crash course kind of perspective on this, we're looking at the start function is used for initialization to kind of start our game up, and then the update function is where really all of our code logic takes place, because the update's called once every single frame of our game. And so there's where we can actually, like I said, put some of our logic and things like that in. And once we've actually written a script, what you want to do is just think about, you have your script, and scripts are going to be attached to game object in your scene. You simply drag and drop those guys onto the game object in the inspector here, and then you can actually set variables and things like that through what you expose into your script. That's going to be available to the game object through the script. And then finally, the real thing to think about that is scripts are attached to game objects, and that's how you get your core interactivity. So you create a game object, you attach a script to it, and that script is thought of as kind of like this self-contained piece of code that's running for that particular game object. You can reuse scripts as we did with these cubes. We can also have scripts interact with each other, so there's an event system to work with and things like that. Now, obviously, that's beyond the scope of a getting started type video, but where you'll really want to go on beyond this is definitely going to the scripting overview here and checking out how the scripting works within Unity. But really, it's not so much as, that's pretty much it. That's all there really is to it. But where you're really going to spend your time is in the scripting reference. So you're going to basically spend your time looking at the runtime classes. And, any time that you're looking for something, so say you want to know what something does, like what I'll do is I'll just say, well, here, transform. And then I'll find transform here, and I'll go look through, and I'll see what it does. And I'll see what I need to do. I'll see what functions it needs, and then I'll just grab those functions and add them into my code. So as far as how scripting works, if you have any scripting background or anything like that, and you're coming from a different application, those same core scripting foundations that you have are going to work inside of Unity. The only real thing that you need to do is just understand what the runtime classes are, and the scripting reference in Unity, like I said, is fantastic, and it's real easy to use. So I highly recommend that you go check that out.